Around the World segment tonight, the U.S. may pull out of the UN Human Rights Council because of UN anti-Israel bias. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, said, and this is a quote, "It's hard to accept that this council has never considered a resolution on Venezuela, and yet it adopted 5 biased resolutions in March against a single country, Israel." So why be a part of a Human Rights Council that doesn't actually care about human rights? Watch.
Being a member of this council is a privilege, and no country who is a human rights violator should be allowed a seat at the table. Finally, it's hard to accept that this council has never considered a resolution on Venezuela, and yet it adopted 5 biased resolutions in March against a single country, Israel. It is essential that this council address its chronic anti-Israel bias if it is to have any credibility.
With me now, former IDF soldier and former NYPD officer, Mika Danzig. Mika, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Liz.
All right, Mika, you heard Ambassador Haley's example of 5 resolutions, anti-Israel resolutions in March versus 0 against Venezuela. I'll give you one better, a fact that's even better than that. 70 resolutions against Israel compared to only 7 resolutions against Iran. I don't know how they can even defend the idea that they aren't biased against Israel.
They don't even bother to care to defend. It's the, what's the expression? The inmates are running the asylum. That is exactly what the UN is at this point, certainly the General Assembly. And for certain, that is the case with the UN Human Rights Council that Nikki Haley was addressing.
Right, and I mean, think about some of these other countries that are currently on the council, the Human Rights Council, or that have been. I mean, we have Cuba, Venezuela, China, Saudi Arabia, the Philippines, and formerly Russia and Pakistan. I guess I don't even understand. I 100% side with Ambassador Haley here. I don't understand why we're on this council. I'm not even quite sure why we're a member of the United Nations at all at this point when our money goes to things like that, when it goes to anti-Israel bias, when countries that are egregious human rights violators sit on something called the Human Rights Council.
Yeah, and this has far-reaching implications beyond just the incredible bias against Israel. I mean, there are genuine human rights violations that are going on all over the world, horrific ones. And when you have a Human Rights Council that, as Ambassador Haley pointed out, requires no human rights consideration or democratic consideration in your own country in order to be a member of the Human Rights Council, or even its president. Saudi Arabia was the president, had the presidency of the Human Rights Council. I mean, that's incredible. They had 159 beheadings in Saudi Arabia recently, and including for not capital offenses, but for, you know, selling drugs, for engaging in blasphemy, for being an apostate, religious violations. They're beheading people in Saudi Arabia. They're whipping people in Saudi Arabia for doing things that are against Sharia law. They recently put a woman in jail in Saudi Arabia for driving. So they're the president of the Human Rights Commission. So that is the reason why the Human Rights Commission is so obsessively focused on Israel. In fact, since 2002 through today, the Human Rights Commission has had fully half of its resolutions about Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, the only country in the Middle East where women have rights, where gays have rights, where there's freedom of religion, access to religious sites protected for all. That's what their obsessive focus has been about. So how can they pay attention to what's going on in the Sudan, what's going on in Syria? Or, for example, what Russia has done in the Ukraine and Crimea, which has never been addressed by the Human Rights Commission.
Right. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. How on earth would they have time to look at real human rights violations when they're singularly focused? They're obsessed with looking at Israel. Mika, answer me this, though. Critics of Donald Trump say that withdrawing from the Human Rights Council would hurt Israel more than it would help Israel, even though if we withdrew, it would ostensibly be because of our support for Israel and the anti-Israel bias inherent to the Human Rights Council. What say you to that?
How could it be worse? I mean, you have, as Nikki Haley just pointed out, in the past month, when horrible things are occurring all over the world, including by member states of the Human Rights Council, such as Venezuela, such as the UAE, such as Bangladesh, you have 5 resolutions against Israel. What did America's presence do on the Human Rights Council? Did it stop that? Of course not. If America were to withdraw its funds from supporting the Human Rights Council, that would actually be a strong message.
Right, and then there you have it. It's the money. The money is behind it. Well, let me ask you this, too. There was a boycott of the Human Rights Council under President Bush several years back. This wouldn't be unprecedented if we did refuse to participate in the Human Rights Council for the time being. But I guess my question is did it change anything when we did this under President Bush?
We actually did see, because of the attention that the Bush administration brought to the, gross behavior of the Human Rights Council and its members, we saw, a slight dip, in fact, in their biased behavior and in the nature of their focus. And when the Obama administration initially conditioned it rejoining the Human Rights Commission on the behavior improving, the Human Rights Commission actually did address, at least in larger numbers, true human rights violators, as opposed to obsessively focusing on Israel, as they clearly are doing right now.
Well, it's still a sad state of things when we're considering it to be a success when we just see a minor dip in anti-Israel resolutions rather than the elimination of them completely. Mika, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Of course, my pleasure.